to them.
Yeah, I got it.
We'll do the minutes. I'll share it, we're gonna move it, because you're gonna have to share during your time, and then we'll go.
Okay, yeah, that's good. Really? See the power you have? I know, right? Just made eye contact, the place went quiet. I know.
Talk amongst yourselves, we have a few minutes.
Just like at home, isn't it?
Yeah. We can't start.
Yeah. Should I get you inside?
Give me another, he's driving.
Yeah. Is that it? But I feel like it's aggressive, right?
Yeah.
Yes, all of that, yes. Yeah, so it's, and I had shared it with a couple of the people that I, know in the district that are there. And none of them have really.
Right, oh, you're good. You can't, is that right?
I didn't want to, the financial.
You can't be lying to the fact that you're not gonna be sued.
Yeah, they're good. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
They were good.
Yeah. What, yellow? Oh, it's boys.
Yeah.
You have good seats? Yeah. Where were you?
Financial.
Oh, that's right, you said you were ready for all season.
Yeah.
Second level,
Yeah.
pretty sure. Yeah, I'm with you.
I'm a little upset nobody's giving them a playoff shot. They're young, but they're gonna be really talented. Really talented. Yeah. He's the real deal. I mean, I'm worried, he's been small at every level. But they say he's 5'10", which I don't buy it, but like 160 pounds.
He was drafted this year.
Huh?
He was drafted this year.
Yeah. Yeah. Mhm.
Will they send him back to you?
They're saying they think he makes the team. They think of any of the prospects, he's got the best shot that he can see. Because he played 2 games at the end of last year. Yeah, after the college season was over.
Also, he was drafted a year prior.
Oh, yeah, yeah. He's had 1 season as a draft, but he played in college. So they brought him up and played 2 games right at the end of the year.
Where he plays
When is the home prospect?
He'll be or DC.
DC was supposed to win the whole thing.
Yeah, their goaltender. The goaltender was drafted. He's supposed to be like the next guy. Yeah, he's there. He was really slow.
doesn't it? All right, I've got 6:30, so I'm going to call us to order. And if you are looking at the agenda, it says executive session. We're going to move that. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that at my comments. So I'm going to invite us to stand for the pledge. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Need a motion to approve the minutes from the 9/10 regular meeting.
So moved. Second.
Questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? I mentioned I would say why that we have an executive session coming up, but we decided to move it a little bit because we have young people here that are part of the superintendent's presentation. We didn't want to make them wait longer while sometimes we don't know how long executive session is going to be. So we're going to move that around a little bit to honor them and to honor their time with us and not make them wait if we get long-winded in executive. So that's the change to the agenda.
It's always nice when we start a meeting by having students, and Mr. McGorry has a couple of our finest here with him, and he's going to talk to us about a very obvious project that you might have seen taking shape down near the tennis courts the last few months. So Mr. McGorry, take it away.
So I'm sure they appreciate moving your executive session. They're getting nervous back there, so we wanted to walk through as soon as we could. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having us tonight. We have awesome kids. We have awesome students. You'll hear me say that a lot. Mr. Bennett says it a lot. And we all say it. We have awesome kids, and two of them are here tonight to talk with you about a mural project. Talk about vision, talk about grit, talk about leadership. These two girls embody all of those words. So tonight I'm going to turn things over to them. They're going to talk you through the mural project, which we completed this past summer down at the tennis court. Girls, I'm going to turn it over to you. You ready? Okay.
Good afternoon. My name is Kaylin Driscoll.
I'm Brielle Towers.
We're very excited to be here and we appreciate your time.
We also want to thank the people that made this possible, including Mr. McGurry and his family, who put in a lot of time and effort to work with our busy summer schedules over the summer, and it wouldn't have been possible without them.
I remember last year when Brielle and I had started talking about this, I don't think we ever pictured it being what it is, especially, you know, kind of the beginning, we were kind of just tossing ideas around, and then we kind of got it confirmed that this is something we were going to go through with, and I think, you know, kind of just seeing the process go through was amazing. And we had Damian Brown, who was a former Homer student, draw this up for us digitally, so that way we could, you know, kind of have a visual to work off of and go from there.
So after we got the idea down and we knew what we were going to do, we started with our base paints, which was funded by the Student Gov program at the high school, which we also really appreciate. So big thanks to Mr. Hatch and Ms. Webb and that club. And we spent a lot of days in last June, in the hot summer sun, and we got a little sunburnt, but that's all right.
McGorry was able to copy everything over so that way we could get it projected. And when I tell you we ran a lot of extension cords, we ran a lot of extension cords.
All 10 of them.
Yep. We just happened to choose to do this when the turf was under construction, so there was no electricity there, so we had to make do with what we could find.
Yeah, so once we got the details done, we were able to start painting the actual design. And we met for a couple of days during the week for about 2 hours after school. And we put a lot of work into those days, especially when the summer started and we got to go on, like, we had family vacations and all of that, so we had to work around a lot of things.
On days that we could work, it was an amazing experience. Days that I remembered, I would bring a speaker and we'd just listen to music and paint, and it was just one of those things where it's like you had to be there to understand that kind of feeling. And you know, week after week, you know, we're meeting, we're seeing progress, there's details that are going up, and it was just really amazing to see it all come together.
Yeah, I feel like it's definitely more than just Muriel to Kaylin and I. We definitely got closer through the hard work and the compromise that went into that, especially with Mr. McGorry and his family as well. And it's really cool to have your idea that you talked about in class one day to actually become a reality. And we're really appreciative that we got this on.
When this had kind of first come about, I know I was a little inspired actually by the leadership summit with Mr. Ebner and Mr. Mack, where we kind of talked about servant leadership and what it means to kind of do good in your community and give back and create those projects that really bring everybody together. And while we didn't have very many people there, I know McGorry had said that there was a lot of support from the community and there was a lot of people that were kind of just following us along as we went through. So I think that was really awesome to kind of see everyone kind of come together in an essence. But yeah, we'd like to thank you for everything. We really appreciate it.
Questions for our students?
About how long did it take, like from start to finish? You know, the actual.
Yeah, we came up with the idea in
I was
May.
gonna say it was pretty early.
Yeah, and so it took a while for us to like draw it up and think of. We had so many different ideas, and we actually started painting in June, and then we finished the painting.
It was right before school. It
Yeah,
was- we,
so like,
we met
beginning
the
of this month.
day before the first day of school actually.
Yeah.
And that was kind of when we put a lot of the finishing touches on it, so.
What do you two want to do after school? Is this an avenue for your career path?
Yeah, so
Okay.
I work with Molly Reagan, and she does a lot of mural programs. So I took a lot of stuff that I've learned from that and put it into this. And I would like to do that when I'm like after school, after college and stuff. So yeah.
I, on the other hand, will not be following the arts career. I'm actually interested in going to a law profession, so.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Got some certificates.
So of the people in the community, I got to probably watch the most as this happens, because we live right across the street from it. And so really it's how I start most of my days. When I go out the door to get in my car and commute, I see the mural. So for both of you, thank you so much for having the idea, for seeing it through. I'm sure there were times when you wanted to just give up and grab the rollers and just paint over everything and call it a wall. I'm so glad that you didn't. So thank you so much for giving of yourself to our community and to our school. Thank you.
No, that's all.
That's it, okay.
The one thing I will add, I can't help myself.
Uh-huh.
A lot of people don't know this, the girls do, but the person on the far left of that picture in the split, fashioned after Mr. Van Etten.
My young days, I was more flexible.
All right. So with that in mind, I'm going to invite a motion to move to executive session to discuss the employment of a particular person or persons and or potential litigation.
Second.
Question or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? you everybody for your patience. The work that we needed to do, so. That now brings us to our board presentation. So, as you know, we're on a year where Superintendent Turk has shared his intent to retire at the end of the year, which means as a board we have some work to do in identifying and selecting and employing a new superintendent through the year. And part of our work is to understand a process by which that can happen, and there's some different options that we have available to us as a board of how that's going to happen. We could choose to manage the search on our own, or we could outside contract for some help and support in that, and that comes in a couple of different ways as well. So tonight we've asked Dr. Matt Cook, superintendent of the BOCES, OCM BOCES, to come and share with us for the sake of being transparent. Before it was public that Superintendent Turk was intending to retire, the board entertained Dr. Cook in an executive session because, again, it wasn't public yet. So some of us have heard some of these pieces, but it's important that we make this part of our public session so that our community gets to hear the proposal that Dr. Cook is bringing to us of how we might navigate into that. So with that, Mr. Matt Cook, thank you for being with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So appreciate being here, and I'll start a little cautiously because I don't like to say nice things about Tom in front of him because I think you understand why. But no, Tom's leadership within the region has been phenomenal, and he will be missed. And so, you know, really appreciate all the work that you've done, and some big shoes to fill. So when we're thinking about you as a board taking that step to find your next superintendent, I would argue that one of the things that a board does, that's one of the most important things a board does, is have the opportunity to hire a superintendent and to fill those shoes. So yeah, I agree. There's some work ahead for the board, right? And so what I wanted to do tonight is describe a little bit about the process in general. I'll tell you a little bit about what BOCES does specifically, and then walk you through your decision points and also a potential draft timeline, just so you sort of see how this would look and how this could play out. And the fact that we're doing this right now in September and we're not talking about filling it until July 1 means you're in a really good place. So not concerned about the timeline at all, but wanted to be able to have you understand that. So first thing to know, just from a BOCES standpoint, is as the district superintendent, I have a couple of functions. And one of the functions is that I'm essentially the superintendent of the BOCES, right? In the same way that Mr. Turk is the superintendent of this district. But I'm also partially employed by New York State Education Department, and as such, I'm the state education representative within this region, within what's called the sole supervisory district of the Onondaga, Cortland, Madison BOCES, right? So in that capacity, because you're a district that has already bought into the core services of BOCES, you get my search consultant services for free. So you're not paying anything extra for having me do the search. Now, there would be costs that the district would incur, but there's things like advertising and things like that, so they're relatively minor. But instead of hiring an outside consultant or working, as you indicated, districts can do it on their own, but usually when they do that, they're doing it with their school attorney, helping out through the process, because there's a heavy lift that goes along with working on something like this. So there's, generally speaking, some extra costs if you're hiring somebody from the outside. If you go with BOCES, you get what essentially would be my services for no additional cost. So that's one of the benefits or one of the features. I'd say one of the other things about being the district superintendent and having connections across the rest of the state that winds up being helpful is there are 37 BOCES, so that means that I have 36 best friends. And if we have candidates from other parts of the state that I don't know personally, I call them up and I say, tell me what you know about this person. Much in the same way that when somebody from this region applies for a superintendency somewhere else, I get the phone call and they say, tell me about that person, and I'm able to fill them in on the story about what's going on with those candidates. So the network is extraordinarily helpful. So that's another thing that you should know. So when we, and I've outlined some of those bullet points and some of the pieces about what BOCES does and how that works. So I'm not gonna read the letter to you, but I want to make sure that if you do have any specific questions about any of those bullet points, we get into that with you. What I'd like to spend a little bit more of my time on is just sort of the big picture decisions that you have to make and what that winds up looking like. So that's the second page, starts to get into that. And the first decision is just what I talked about. It's the search consultant versus using the BOCES or doing it on your own. And that's really, that's entirely up to the board. I'm not going to try to weigh one way or the other. Obviously I enjoy doing the searches. I have a vested interest in finding a successful candidate for Homer, because if Homer's running well, then that makes my life easier, right? But also have a vested interest because the only constituency that I have to care about are the kids within the sole supervisory district, right? So I'm not beholden to anybody else. And so for me, having the best superintendent in every district possible is good for kids, and that's what I'm thinking about. So that's my lens. If you do choose to go with an outside consultant agent, what has been my experience so far in this region is that person will probably wind up calling me at some point, and we'll have a conversation about candidates, because that's often what happens. And I don't mean that to say that in a negative. I think that's positive. I have relationships with the search consultants. I'd rather let them know what I'm thinking, or let them know if I have experiences with some of the candidates. We do that on a fairly regular basis. One way or the other, I'll probably wind up being somewhat involved because I do represent the region, and the connections that we've made over the years have been helpful, and that winds up just being helpful in the process. So regardless of what you decide, I'll be wanting to help Homer find the superintendent that's the best fit for you. So I just want you to know that. And I am not trying to put my thumb on the scales one way or the other. I am likely to be doing the Cincinnati superintendent search at the same time. And so if you're using me, the thing that I would just want to work out with those two boards is we'll want to get some dates on the books right away, so that we can block out time for interview process and things like that, so that I'm not doing that too late. It's super nice that we are aware of both of these potential searches at the same time, and so we're going to be able to coordinate those if both districts choose to use BOCES. I have not made this presentation to them yet, but they're aware, and that conversation is fairly public. So we're in the process of working through all of those things together. So I just wanted you to know that. So your search consultant is your first big decision. Doesn't need to be made, no decisions need to be made tonight. So I just want to take any pressure that you have off of that. If you do decide to use me or somebody else, you'll need a board resolution that indicates that. We have a board resolution for bringing BOCES on board. So if you do choose to use us, we'll just get you that language for the resolution, and I wouldn't need to come back for that meeting. It's a relatively quick process. The bigger conversation is what type of search do you want? And so right now I just want to take some time and outline the two main kinds of searches that are happening within the state right now, and sort of the reasons for those two kinds of searches. The first is what you think of as the open or traditional search. Now, I say open and traditional, but open doesn't mean open all the way, right? So there's a candidate pool. I'm just going to use the number 20 just because it's an easy number for math. And some of the searches that I've done recently, the candidate pools have been sort of between mid-teens to low 20s. So that's not an unreasonable kind of number. But let's say we have 20 candidates, and we'll presume for the sake of this conversation that I'm doing the search with you. And I guess I'll just also say, I see my role as facilitating your search. It's not my search. I'm not, it's the Homer search, right? And so I'm facilitating that for the board. It's not my thing. But if we have an open search, that's still going to remain, candidates are still going to remain confidential until the finals. That's typically how that works, right? So if you had 20 candidates, you would see all 20 candidates as a board. You would know who it is, all of the different folks that you potentially be interviewing. I don't keep any of that. The way I typically will run these searches is I'll do a screening with all of the candidates. If I already know them, the screening doesn't have to be long. It could be more of a check-in to see how they match it with Homer. That could be a phone call or a Zoom, but I tend to try to meet with candidates in person. And I try to get to know as many potential candidates as I can throughout the state. Just this week, actually just yesterday and today, I was in Saratoga Springs for the state superintendent conference, and I spent 2 hours yesterday in a room with 2 other district superintendents like me, talking to people who are prospective superintendent candidates, and knowing that this was a potential search, I sort of had my ears open for what this looks like. So one of the things that we do on a regular basis is try to get candidate pools and try to understand who might be a good fit for what. So there certainly are some folks that I'm aware of that I think might be an interesting fit for Homer already. So as we move forward, you should be thinking about that. But let's say we have 20 candidates. You'd see all of them. I'm probably going to say to you, like, here's 5 that I think you really ought to see. Here's maybe 5 that I have some concerns about for X, Y or Z reason. And here's the 10 in the middle, and let's talk about those 10. And here's what I found out so far, and how many of those do you want to see, right? And so then, we narrow that down. Let's say you want to see 12 of the 20. We have some screening interviews with you as a board. We probably try to chunk that down after that, and then you get down to say 6 or 7 or 8 of those. Go on to the next round, and then maybe you get down to that final 2 or 3. That's your ideal state. That's when the process becomes more open. And that's when you typically have what you think of as that sort of day in the district for a candidate. So, there'd be student groups and faculty groups and non-instructional staff and parents and families and community members who would all be funneled through a cycle of being able to meet with the candidates and get feedback and provide feedback to the board. And then the board typically would meet with those people at the end of that, do a processing. Sometimes it's a dinner, but try to get a sense of how the day went and all of that. That's where that becomes common, or that's where that becomes public. And generally speaking, those are the only candidates' names who become public to everybody. When that happens, where those people are currently employed, sometimes, let's say you have 3 candidates. Only one's going to get the job. 2 are going to go back to their districts. So that's tough. And what's a little different now than it was even 10 years ago is that there's a political landscape that's changed a little bit. Boards are a little different, communities are a little different, and the life expectancy of superintendents has changed. When I started out as a superintendent in the, I think it was around 2012, 2013, the average lifespan of a superintendent was about 5 to 7 years. The average lifespan of a superintendency right now is about 3 or 4 years. And what's changed is the nature of the job has changed. Candidates haven't really changed, but the job is a little trickier. And sometimes communities and boards are a little less forgiving. So I say that in the context of that's why people have gone with the confidential search sometimes. And what that does is it increases the candidate pool a little bit, because you might have sitting superintendents who are not in trouble in their current districts, but wanting an opportunity to come to a place like Homer, but don't want to take the chance of being 2nd or 3rd in an open search and then having to go back to their districts. Because typically what has been happening more and more throughout the state is if you're in an open search and you're not the finalist who gets the job, but you're the finalist who goes back to your district, you're not the superintendent there very much longer, or sometimes you're not the assistant superintendent there very much longer, because people have taken a burn to it in a way that they didn't used to in the same way. That's just what we started to see across the state. So when districts are weighing that choice between the open search, the more traditional search, or the confidential search, what you're thinking about is candidate pool versus transparency and input. So the pro of the closed or the confidential search is the candidate pool is probably going to be a little deeper and probably a little stronger. But the con is that the community and the staff often feel like the board is not getting their input on the specific candidates, and that can be a downside. And then the pro and the con of the other is just the exact opposite, right? So more openness, more transparency, more input on the specific candidates if you're in the open search, but your candidate pool might be a little different. Here's where it's tricky for Homer. Your district is sort of right in that sweet spot of it's really hard for me to make a recommendation one way or the other, and so I'm not going to. If you push me, I guess I probably would. But let me explain why. If you're a large suburban district right now, generally speaking, almost all of those searches are confidential, because what you're looking to attract is high-level district administrators, deputy superintendents, assistant superintendents from comparable districts, or sitting superintendents in smaller districts. If you're a small district, I did the DeRuyter search a little while ago, and that was an open search. And if you're a small district, 350 kids, that's generally speaking not going to be a sitting superintendent going from one district to another. That's going to be somebody who is maybe a principal or a district level official someplace, generally speaking in a smaller district, or somebody who wants to try the superintendency and maybe they're in a mid-sized district. But generally they're not going to get that pushback in a small district. Homer is the size where it's like sort of right in between those things. You're not going to get larger suburban sitting superintendents that probably want to go to Homer because geographically it might not make sense for them, financially it might not make sense for them, career-wise it might not make sense for them. You will get some smaller school superintendents who might want to come to Homer. Homer's an attractive district. Like this district's going to kind of sell itself, so that's the good news. But in terms of which kind of search is going to get you the best candidate pool, it's not super clear to me. I think you're also going to have some highly qualified folks who are not currently superintendents, who are ready to make that next step. Probably they've been through the superintendent development program. They've taken some of those educational steps. They're ready to do that next thing in their career. And they're not sometimes as worried about blowback if they finish second or third, right? If you're an assistant superintendent in a district that's kind of the same size, or maybe even a suburban district, and you throw your name in the ring for a superintendency and you don't get it, people in the district will go, well, that's all right, that makes sense. I could see why they would want to go to Homer. I'm not mad if they come back and they were second or third, right? So the candidate pool isn't going to be diminished in the same way. So that's why this is a little bit of a tricky decision to make, and I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other. I just wanted you to understand the pros and the cons of both of those. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Anybody have any questions about any of that? I've talked an awful lot and haven't paused. So, any questions about anything I've covered? Okay. So that's a decision, and that decision will need to be made before we put the brochure up. So when we get to the timeline, I want to think about that, because once you make that decision, for instance, if you say this is a confidential search, you can't go back and say it's going to be open later, right? Because then the candidate pool is going to be very upset, and some of them will drop out. Some of them will say, okay, you said it was going to be confidential, and now you're telling me that you're going to want to meet in the district, and I got into this because it was. So whatever the decision is, and I don't have a preference, we would just want to make sure we know before we print the brochure. Yeah.
Matt, do you have an idea of what the district could potentially save by, if we were to use BOCES versus, I guess not even necessarily BOCES, what does a consultant typically, what's the cost of somebody like that to do a search?
Lowest costs I've seen are somewhere around 15 to 20. The more international kinds of folks are more in the 50,000 range.
Okay.
So it's tens of thousands, but depending on which way you go. So it's not make or break money, but it's not insubstantial.
Sure.
So that's the type of search. Then there's sometimes there's a conversation about an interim. Our timeline is such that, boy, if we have an interim, or your search consultant has not done their job, right? Like we should be in okay shape, and we're not going to have to beg Tom to stay on after January or June 30th. So we should be good there. So the next page is just running you through what the potential timeline would look like, just so you have a sense of where we're at. Generally speaking, a search like this takes about 6 months. So I'm in the middle of the North Syracuse search right now, and we started that. Dan Bowles made his announcement that he was retiring in August, and we got going right on that. We're going to be on track to have the final candidates known to the board by I'd say end of October, beginning of November, with the idea that that person's going to be in place by January 1. So we're able, and that's a big district, and there's a lot of work to be done in a place that's a little bigger, because there's more upfront work you do, and that's a confidential search they're running. And so there's more upfront work that I've been doing to try to get feedback to the board in the confidential search, meeting with constituency groups and focus groups and surveys, and trying to gather a lot of information for the board. But we're in good shape. So I use that as an example of something that is currently happening, and we're still fine. So 6 months is a reasonable time frame, and we've got way more than 6 months. So I'll just walk you through this, right? So meeting tonight to have this conversation with you about the board, that's your initial meeting. I would say we probably don't need to develop that vacancy announcement. Now, we really don't need to develop it until probably January. But because we have the luxury of time, and you want to get out and start getting a good candidate pool, I think, earlier is better. So I would start working with our marketing team and your folks, and we would be back and forth with a lot of conversations. We would put together the brochure, we would put together all the marketing materials. Our marketing folks would do that. And that's, again, mostly part of the cost. What you would pay for is the advertising fees. So we're advertising in things like the NISCUS flyer, the NISBA program, SANES, some of those kinds of places where we're going to be looking for candidates. So that's going to be a few $1,000s for that. But we would develop that with you. You'd be able to see all of that along the way, and you'd be able to have final say on what that looks like. So we'd get that printed out and sent out in December. I think doing it before the holidays would be good, because people sort of talk to ruminate on sort of where they're at, what they're looking for. I would say in a search like this, deadline of receipts for application end of January. That's probably a reasonable time frame. That gives me time to start meeting and screening with candidates that I would start doing as they come in, and that happens. Like I was able to do most of the North Syracuse screenings before the posting closed, because people were interested, and I started getting calls. I think Homer is going to be similar in that, those two districts have some real differences in terms of size and scope, but both attractive districts. Like I think Homer is going to be one that if you're looking for a mid-sized district that's well-run and gets good results and just is in a pretty good standing, in a pretty good place, this is the kind of place that people are going to want to gravitate towards. So I think it's going to be a fairly attractive place to apply. But screenings would all be done by mid-February. Board gets to review all the candidates by the end of February. That's that process that I talked to you a little bit about. We'd be setting up those interviews. The initial interviews would be done by the end of March. You'd have April to do stakeholder groups and to work through all of that. I think by the end of by the mid-April, end of April, you'll probably have a good sense of who that candidate is, what we're looking at. And I like to have that, I like to have a little cushion built in, because if you do get a sitting soup, sometimes they need 60 days in terms of being able to get out of their contract. And so if you know who your candidate is by May 1st, that gives you that time for them to get out of their contract and to be able to exit their district and give their district enough time to be able to start that process and how that works. So, but usually, if it's not a superintendent, even if it is a superintendent, 30 days is the norm for every other administrator, 60 for a superintendent. But even in all the the searches that I've done and that my colleagues have done across the state, if a candidate wants to go and it's going to be less than 60 days, usually the boards are able to work that out with each other and the person's able to start. So that time frame is very realistic. I don't see any particular issues with it, and I think the candidate pool will be reasonable. So I just wanted you to be able to see sort of what that looks like, how that shakes out, so that you have a sense of what's possible. Any questions about that? Hearing no other questions. I'd be happy to, I know you'll have to deliberate on it and make some decisions, and you have time to do that. If you have other questions for me in the meantime, I'm happy to come back on, or I'm happy to just, correspond by email. We'll want to make sure that the whole board hears whatever the question winds up being, so that everybody has the same information. But I'm happy to be helpful to you in any capacity that I can.
Well, thank you for making the time to come and share with us.
Thank you.
Board, we obviously will have some time to sit with this. If you want to explore search consultancy, let me know that so that I can learn who we can have come and talk with us. But if I don't hear anything between now and our first October meeting, we'll put on the agenda to have a conversation about it and move towards decision in that time frame. Again, if you're outside of that, please make sure to communicate with me so that we can accommodate that. From this point forward, other than names of potential candidates, our communication will be as transparent as the level we choose as a board, whether we choose that open or the closed search. But we'll try our best to make sure all those pieces are public for folks to see that we choose to do that.
So do we, I'm sorry, John.
So do we talk as a board, like, we don't ever really talk about like what our vision is and what we're looking for, so are we gonna meet as a board and talk about what we're looking for in our next?
We will, if we choose an open search, we will do that as an open conversation in public session.
And if we choose a closed search?
So I'll answer it just from my lens, right? Either way, if you go with me, whichever kind of search you have, I think the conversation about that is important, right? Whether you use me or you use another search consultant, I'm gonna wanna spend time with the board. Some of that can be done in open session, some of that can be done in executive session, depending on what it is we're specifically talking about. But I'm gonna wanna know what's important to you, right? And so, that will help me filter out, when we're screening candidates. So regardless of who you use for a search consultant, they're gonna wanna have a conversation like that with you.
My opinion on this process is that I feel like an open way is the way to go to include our district, the people that are working in our district and stuff like that. I do feel like that is probably the most desirable approach, especially being that they're gonna be the ones working with them directly. And I also do feel that Matt's services are an excellent thing. That's something that we should all be really strongly considering. And if not, by next meeting, have that resolution from BOCES ready to vote on that and move on it, unless there's some sort of stronger opinion toward that with that. But I definitely feel like being proactive, getting on top of it is really going to be in our best interest here to ensure that, you know, we take these serious steps and make sure that also too that we can start gathering some feedback too from if we decide to go with the open search, that, you know, part of that vision I think is going to be important that we hear from people that will be part of that bottom part of the search, hearing from them what are they looking for, so that when we do meet to discuss those things, that we can ensure that that voice is heard, and that's part of that. So, but that's my feelings, and I feel very strongly about moving forward, and very thankful that Matt was able to come and really outline stuff, and I really feel like that, feels something that we should be moving forward with.
Yeah, my understanding is our first decision is whether we choose to do a consultant, work with Dr. Cook, or some other option. So once we make that, then that cascades what decisions happen next. So as a board, our first decision is how do we want to be guided as we do our search. As he reminded us, this is still our search, and we're seeking guidance outside of ourselves. Because at least in my opinion, it would be really easy for us to make a misstep that we didn't mean to make. And so we want to make sure we have a guide that's walking. And so that's our first choice, is what does that guidance look like and who's providing that? And then out of that, we will have a series of conversations and decisions that will ultimately culminate sometime by the end of next April, where we go.
So when do we talk about which avenue we want to take?
So that'll be, next meeting, we'll put that on the agenda, of having that ready to talk through that, and make a decision at that point. I feel like tonight we wanted to receive, get room to think, we'll talk, we'll make a decision next meeting so that we can keep moving forward. Is that workable for everybody?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please take a Homer cookie back before you leave.
Yeah.
You know what? I'm dying to, but I'm not gonna.
You're a better man than I'm at.
Thanks.
Thank you.
We'll move to new business. I need a motion to approve the warrants report and claim auditors reports.
So moved.
Second?
Questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion to approve the treasurer's report.
Second.
Questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? You have, for your information, you have an investment summary and a budget status and revenue status report. That moves us all the way down to the reports. I need a motion to approve the reports from the Committee on Special Education.
Second.
Questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion to approve the disposal of items from the high school.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or comments?
Did you guys check out the years?
What'd you say?
1973, there's still a book up there from that old. I thought that was impressive.
I almost want to start like an archaeological site or something. Additional comments or questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion to accept the donation in the amount of $250 from the Scientist Industrial Support Program.
So moved. Second.
Questions or comments?
Thank you.
Thank you.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion to approve the high school choir traveling to Rochester, New York, December 5 through 8 to attend the NISMA State Conference.
Second.
Questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Alright. Motion to approve the DECA students traveling to Rochester, March 5 to 7 to attend the DECA State Conference, Career Conference.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or comments?
That was probably the most detailed I've ever seen a request come through. I was super impressed. Yeah, no, it's the real deal.
Further questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion to approve the district-wide safety plan.
Second.
Questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion to approve the network printing services resolution.
Second.
Questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion to approve personnel as presented by Superintendent Turk.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? And that moves us into informational items.
Yes, I've got a couple for you tonight. First are a number of fundraising updates. One from the intermediate school, the annual pajama drive run by Connie Martin. Our athletics department, varsity club, will be doing a pickleball tournament. It would be great to have a board representation. If anyone's interested, I will play along with you. And then our high school DECA group had a number of different fundraising activities, candy bars, tumblers, and they're in the process of talking about what I think is a neat concept, and that's a in-school cafe that would be open when students arrive in the morning. We're working through some of those details with them, but we think it'd be a nice option. They would have, they wouldn't serve food because we do that through the cafeteria, but they would have slushies and things like that. So something that they're talking about, it would be student run, which would be exciting. Give them an opportunity to plan all the aspects of it. So we'll keep you updated on that if we actually get to that. The other is a staff update. We've got our BOCES staff, the related service providers that are across the district, and then we have our Cortland migrant education tutor that's at the high school. And that's what we have.
All right. This is the portion of our meeting where we love to hear from our community, and we didn't have anybody sign up, but is anybody wishing to be heard this evening? I understand we have no board committee reports, but we do have a couple of district committee reports.
Yes, Mr. Ebner, I have asked him to give you an update on 2 meetings that he has chaired, the Professional Learning Committee and the Instructional Leadership.
Thank you. We will go in that order. PLC, we met September 10th. It was the first time in my history here that we had full board representation, so thank you to the board members who were able to clear your schedules to come, and thank you to all the staff. It was a very well-attended PLC meeting. We have determined, our first staff development day this year is November 5th, which is a little bit of change for us. Typically it's October, but the November 5th day will allow our OC's students to not miss a day of instruction, which is fantastic. So, and it's also a staff development day throughout the region, so maybe we can hook up with other districts and share our knowledge and love with each other. So we've narrowed down the structure of the day. One of the things that people like is the ability to learn from each other through various learning sessions, through teachers and staff who want to volunteer their expertise to share within a learning session. So we're going to do typically 33 morning learning sessions. We'll break for lunch, and then we'll have department and grade level collaboration time in the afternoon. So that'll be the structure of the day, kind of what fits in that day. We'll put out my office will put out a request for proposals for those staff members who are so much interested in teaching their colleagues something that they're doing great and sharing the knowledge that they have that's working in their classrooms and their spaces. Also what we plan on doing is focusing our efforts around our strategic plan focus areas of student engagement, SEL, and community engagement. So great things going on in those areas that teachers and staff want to share. That will be our focus for the entire learning day. Any questions about PL? For those people that were there, did I miss anything? Any questions about PLC? We have another meeting coming up in the next 2 weeks, October 8th, I believe. So we'll be honing in and continuously looking at finalizing that agenda. So there's a lot that goes into it. One of the kinks this year, though, just so our staff is aware, and I thank Mrs. Greenfield for helping get the message out here, there is an updated mandatory reporter training that all certificate holders, teachers, teaching assistants, administrators, you have to do by April 1, 2025. There is a program out there. It's a 2-hour program. Many people across the district have already completed it. And you're responsible for your own certification since 2015 with the new CTLE requirements. So what happens, you have to verify that you completed this course to keep your certification. So it is new. So that kind of put a kink in our planning because there's providing time for some of our staff to get that done since it is a requirement for them to continue to work and hold their certification. So we'll talk more about that on October 8th and what that does to our day and what that looks like. But in my opinion, giving staff the opportunity to work on a certification requirement is not a bad idea. And I completed the training myself. It is a very valuable training, and it's a great reminder about a lot of things that as mandatory reporters that we have to keep in mind as we work with children. So that was the PLC meeting. Today we had
Before
our.
I move on to the next one, just
got
a
it.
question. You mentioned that you're going to put out a request for proposal for teachers to share.
Yep.
I wonder if it's worth thinking about putting out a system for peers to nominate. Because there may be somebody who has an amazing nugget to share, but is super humble and isn't going to put their name forward. And again, I understand a risk of that can become a popularity contest, but there may be a valuable piece that's kind of hidden in plain sight and just needs an encouragement. So I'm wondering if there's a way to encourage some colleagues to step forward that might feel a little reluctant.
We'll definitely make that part of our proposal. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. All right. Today, any others on PLC? Thank you. We had our first ILC meeting of the year. We had a very lengthy agenda today. We started our agenda off with our instructional technology coach, Lancy Collins, going over a new tool that we've invested in called DIFIT. It's a technology tool that allows teachers to differentiate any activity you want, basically, in 64 different languages, any reading level that kids are at. You can differentiate your lessons to fit the various learning needs of our students. And again, it's any teacher, any grade level, any content area. It's a great resource. We invested in it a little bit last year. We went full force with Mr. Finn's help to get this tool in the hands of our teachers. And it's, you know, as a former teacher, I wish I had this type of tool when I was teaching. Having a classroom of 20 kids, 25 kids, sometimes 30 kids. They were all reading at different levels. They were coming to us from different places, different starting points, and having a tool like this to be able to better meet each individual student's needs is just fantastic. So we've seen a lot of success for teachers that are using it, and I think it's just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. We reviewed the staff development day, just as I did previously here. We talk a lot about our department meeting structures. Our departments are typically our 6 through 12 content area departments. We have a curriculum area lead teacher in most of those areas, science, social studies, math. We do have some pre-K through 12 departments like art, our library team, music, PE. So talking about what our department meeting structures look like, because we've adjusted the end of our day and what times those are. And in previous years, you know, we had time embedded in during the instructional day when departments could meet between the high school and the junior high school. And this year it's a little different, so we're working through the kinks, and departments are doing a bunch of different things to make sure that that necessary collaboration happens. So we've agreed to make a master calendar, so when everyone knows when we'll be meeting as a content area. So all the administrators will know when the PE department will meet, when the science department, where they're meeting, who they're meeting with. I give credit to our curriculum area lead teachers and our building leaders to really help make this calendar that we're going to roll out work. Just so we're all aware of who's meeting who when. I tried to sell, again, last year we created a STEAM advisory team to look at our science, technology, engineering, the arts, and mathematics initiative that we have. We had a great team. We had a couple meetings last year. We came up with a working definition of our work, and I put out a request for bigger membership moving into this year. We'll be planning a meeting coming up sometime in early October. The last thing we talked about was our technology application review process. A couple years ago, we put our grade level leaders and our curriculum area lead teachers on a journey to determine what technology applications do we have in the district. And we have a lot of technology applications that teachers have at their disposal. At last count, we were over 300 different applications that teachers had. Not all teachers have access to all of them, but if you add them all together, sum total, it's a lot of applications. And some of those are redundant. That's what we're going to study this year is what are the redundant applications? Do we need, do we need 15 math applications across the district, or can we narrow that down to have three valuable that all teachers have access to, all teachers can use? This is not a problem unique to Homer. It exists wherever I've been, but looking at being a little more judicious with the applications we use, because there's a lot of human resources that go into not only rostering applications, requesting the application, purchasing the application, supporting the application from a technology standpoint, and the hours it takes to learn a new application from the user end. So a lot of effort goes into this. So we're going to take the year, and we're really going to focus on every application we have by content area, by grade level, and start some of those pre-K through 12 articulation conversations about what applications work best for us based on the curriculum we've developed and the resources we are currently using to teach from. It's a big endeavor. It's a big task. We say we want to accomplish it in 1 year. It may take more than 1 year because it's a big, heavy lift. So that's where we're at with that. That was our meeting. Anybody have any questions about it?
I do.
Yeah.
I want to go back to when you were talking about the meetings for the grades and departments. Is there any parameters as to how often they are removed from the teaching day, the classroom?
No. Typically, historically, past practice has dictated there's one department meeting a month.
Okay.
But it's not outlined in the contract or anything like that, but it's been historically, that's what each department has done over time.
And do all of these meetings take place during the teaching day? Like, my question revolves around how often are we pulling teachers from a classroom?
Right now, we're not pulling any right now because each department really hasn't had an opportunity to meet yet because they were waiting for kind of have this conversation.
They must be meeting for something though, because I've already, one of my kids has gone to see a teacher and they were in a meeting kind of thing. So I'm just curious how often, or if we have any parameters in place that limit how often we're having them leave classrooms for meetings.
If I could just jump in, one of the things that the value of what Jeff's talking about with the calendar is getting it down in black and white so you can see it all, you can identify. Take a teacher, how many times are we asking that person to be
Yes.
out? Because just like you're saying, our goal is to minimize that. And so having it more organized will certainly help us to do that.
And our priority this year too, when planning this summer as an administrative team was, let's be a little more aligned and coordinated with the need for substitutes from a district standpoint when we're planning, during the school day professional learning opportunities, right? Being more cognizant of what's happening when, how many, how often, really taking it through our leadership team filter of, well, we got this, and this 3 straight days, right? And that's a whole number of teachers out of one building for an entire day. So again, those master calendars really come in handy with this work. So we're just gonna move that into ILC and look at our departments and kind of, what Tom said, do the same thing. Be aware of how often it can potentially happen and, tweak the calendar as we need.
Jeff, those 15 math programs those are definitely necessary.
You come from a wealth of knowledge, man. I appreciate that.
Well, then we'll move to sharing board member activities.
So I went to a board training in Syracuse. There was a few of us that represented Homer. It was led by Colleen Henrik. And it was great. It was great to represent Homer. She passed down some new legislation from the Commissioner of Education that's going to be put into place next year. She also went over best practices for board members, and it was really awesome.
It was really good.
I'm at the time of year where I'm a field hockey dad, so I've been through several games and historic moment last week for the first time in we can't think of how long. The girls beat Casanova 1-0 here at home, which was a pretty big deal. It made the night for the girls, and I think the folks connected. So, but they're having a pretty successful season. They're 4-2 so far. So
Awesome.
getting a lot. We froze last night. All right, upcoming events.
Yes, we've got our high school homecoming events this Friday evening. Next week, we look at our junior high open house. The week after that, we have our elementary open house. And there are a lot of things on the list this time of year, a number of opportunities for our kids and our community to get involved in the school. So hope we can take advantage of some of those.
Excellent. And I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.